Welcome to the How to Program with Java podcast, where all you need is the desire to learn, and you too can become a Java programmer with absolutely no knowledge of programming. And now, your host, Trevor Page.
Boys and girls, children of all ages, ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Episode number 61 coming at you live right now. I guess it's not exactly live, it's a pre-recorded show, as always. That's what a podcast is all about. In any case, how the heck are you? How's it going? How's your day? How's your night? How's your afternoon? Are you driving right now? Are you enjoying a nice jog outside? I know I'm not, because the weather here is, of course, starting to make the turn for the worse as we approach the dreaded winter season. I hate the winter. I love the summer. I'm not a skier. I'm not a winter sports kind of guy. I'm an armchair athlete. I'll sit down and enjoy a nice game of hockey. Of course, I'm Canadian. That's what is in our blood. I'm obviously a Toronto Maple Leafs fan. If you didn't know that, then you do now. Born and more or less raised in Toronto. That is obviously something that is also in my blood. So I look forward to now the season started, and I look forward to seeing my Toronto Maple Leafs probably not make it into the playoffs, as they have not done what has been the past 10, 15 years. They maybe made the playoffs, one or two times, in any case. So, yes, we're approaching the horrible weather, so I'm not, unfortunately, enjoying any sort of time outside other than when I'm completely bundled up, taking the new little doggy for a walk outside. In any case, all right. So now I'm sort of wasting time because we're getting into a new topic here, a new subject. We sort of wrapped up our discussion on Hibernate, which is obviously the platform that we use, or the framework that we use to be able to tie a database into our Java applications. So now, what are we going to talk about? What are we going to be doing? Well, let's think about what we've already talked about in the past 60 episodes of the podcast. So in the past 60 episodes, that's 60 episodes, we've gone through the very basics of really any programming language, where we've learned things like control structures, which are if statements and for loops and all those kinds of things, while loops, as well as what a variable is and what collections are in Java, data types, all those fundamentals to programming, all the way through the nuances of Java in terms of it being an object-oriented programming language, what an object is, how they interact with each other, and then, there's tons and tons of stuff that we talked about. We talked a lot about Java in general. I didn't get into really advanced Java, plain Java techniques and whatnot, and that's probably something that I will be elaborating on probably after I get through this current series that I'm going to be talking about, because I think what you need to understand and what you need to learn about is sort of getting the breadth of knowledge around how you would build a web application, because that's what this is really all about. Teaching you guys how to build a web application. And I say that because if you know how to build a web application from front to back, from start to finish, in its entirety, then you can take that knowledge and you can apply it anywhere. Okay, if you know how to work with the business layer, if you know how to work with the data layer, if you know how to work with the presentation layer, if you know how to tie all those layers together and make a web application, God, you're in such a good position. You are ready to just kill it in the world of programming. You're ready to go out and get a job. You are ready to go out and start your own business. You are ready to impress your mother. Okay, this is what it's all about. So the reason why I sort of bring that up is I just had a wonderful comment come in. Let me just flip over and load up that comment, but I can paraphrase the comment for you. And I love getting these kinds of things, these kinds of stories. So if you guys have a story like this and you haven't yet reached out to me to contact me and tell me the story, then please do, because this is what makes doing this so worth it. It's what makes recording these things and putting them out for free so worth it. I got a message from I believe it's Ilaria. I believe that's her name. I apologize if I'm pronouncing it incorrectly, but anyway, you guys have heard I'm horrible at pronouncing names, so. But she extended some thanks, saying that she was able to, she had some exciting news, and the exciting news was largely contributed to, or was in largely contributed to my teachings. She said, as you know, I'm a How to Program with Java aficionado. Good word, aficionado, love it. And she's also a Coders Campus member. She's been following me for a while, and she's thanked me for my teaching. She loves my videos and my podcasts and all the constant dedication that she's had to her learning has landed her a great job. So she's actually, managed to land that job as a, R&D developer for an exciting startup, which is so cool. Working for a startup is such a unique experience, and it is such a great one because you get to also most likely apply your breadth of knowledge as well. That's why I'm teaching this stuff. Like I said, you're going to be able to kill it in the world of programming if you are able to apply all these different concepts that I'm teaching you, because especially in startups, you will most likely be on a small team and you will be responsible for a lot of stuff. So huge congratulations goes out to her for actually pulling it off, landing the job. I know I only had a one part of it. I cannot contribute the entire thing, her success to me exactly, not at all. Obviously, far more work has to be put in on your end. My part of the job is just to show you the path. Obviously, you need to walk that path. So, huge congratulations to her. I'm very, very excited to hear that one of my Coders Campus students has reached out to me and said that they've landed that job, because that's really the goal here. Like I said, to land the job, to start your own business, just to maybe pick up extra gigs on the side for programming. Who knows? Whatever it is, it's going to be money in your pocket. It's going to be food in the mouths of yourself and your children, if you have any, and or maybe a dog, and a roof over your head. That's fantastic. So if you have a story like that, by all means, share it with me. I would love to share it with everybody in our little Java community listening to this podcast. So thank you very much for sending in that comment. Very, very cool. In any case, like I said, getting back on track here, I want to teach you the entire breadth of web application development. And there's one area that we have not yet touched on, and that is what's going to be the focus for, like I said, the next series of episodes that are going to be coming out, and that is on the presentation layer. The presentation layer, what that means is it's what the user actually sees when they go to the web page. It's what actually pops up in their browser and slaps them on the side of the face as they take a look and sort of browse through your website. And this is really a question that I get all the time. I get this question. People come in and they say, hey, it's great. I'm learning all this stuff about Java and we're doing this, console stuff and it's great. And I'm learning about programming and I love it. But I want some graphics here. I want to be able to interact with something, buttons and doodads and whatnot. And they want to know how they can go about doing that. And generally, they want to create some sort of a GUI, a graphical user interface, and they want to make buttons and they want to make maybe a calculator or something, and that's fine for learning purposes. And I know I've said this before, and I upset people all the time when I say this, but that generally tends to be using frameworks like Swing, and the was it AW? Oh, I forget now. This is terrible because I don't use it very often. In any case, they're sort of built in. I don't know if you can call them frameworks, but they're part of the Java package, if you will, to build GUIs inside of Java. So you use Java code to build out your graphical user interface so that they can interact with it, and it does something when they interact with the actual GUI itself. And like I said, fantastic for learning, but there's not a whole lot of job opportunities there. Okay, there's definitely some, because I know people are employed fully in this field of work, but it's quite a little niche field. It's not exactly a very broad, field where there's lots of job openings and availabilities. So I tend to steer away from teaching that stuff, and that's upsetting to some people because it's like, well, how do I use Java to make a user interface? I'm tired of using the console. Well, the thing is that Java is not really meant to build UIs. It's not meant to build the GUIs and to build interactivity. Okay, you can absolutely use it to do that, but really it's best, in my opinion, it's best utilized as part of a larger set of programming languages or whatever, frameworks that work together. Okay, which is why I'm teaching you things like Spring and Hibernate, and now this new concept, this presentation layer concept. That's where I believe Java dovetails very well with everything else. And I know this because this is what I've been doing for the past, whatever it's been now, 7 years or something of my professional career as a programmer, if you can call the last 2 years of my entrepreneurial career a professional career as a programmer, which I think I can because I've been learning a heck of a lot as I've been going through and teaching you guys this stuff. Believe it or not, I do learn things when I teach stuff about programming. I believe the best way to learn is to teach. Believe it or not. You'd be amazed at what you learn when you're forced to actually teach an actual subject. In any case, the point I'm getting at here is Java is. I don't want you guys to think that Java is a graphical type of programming language by any means. All right. I know a lot of people think of Minecraft. Minecraft is a game that's very popular on the, I think, PC and the Xbox and maybe the PlayStations or something, but it was built using Java. So I know Java can create games like Minecraft, and that's fine. But like I said, the majority of the situations, if you want to land that lucrative job, if you wanted the best opportunities to land that lucrative job, web application development using Java as one tool in your tool belt is just the way to go to give you the best shot. So having rambled on and on about that for over 11 minutes now, let me get down to the nitty-gritty of today's episode. We are going to be learning about presentation layer technologies. What that means is you are going to be learning and going on this journey with me to pick up skills in HTML, in CSS, in JavaScript, and in something called jQuery. Okay, so 4 main aspects, and there's probably going to be more sprinkled in there because there's a lot going on as part of the presentation layer. So HTML, hypertext markup language, CSS, cascading style sheets, JavaScript, which sounds like Java. It has the word Java in it, and the syntax is similar. It's quite similar, but it's not an object-oriented language. Okay, JavaScript and Java are two fairly different languages. Okay, a lot of people say it's very, very different, and they are in terms of how they function, but the syntax is similar, and usually the syntax is where a lot of people struggle. So the syntax is very similar, but there's some very important differences between JavaScript and Java that I will obviously be pointing out and teaching you. And then there's something called jQuery, which is something that you use in tandem with JavaScript to be able to make your programming experience a lot nicer. So jQuery is sort of like a framework it's fairly recently created, at least as far as I know. It's fairly recently popped into the mainstream and is being used by a lot of programmers. And it's used to make your life a lot easier with respect to programming across the different browsers. So when we're talking about presentation layer, we're talking about, like I said, what the person sees when they open up an internet browser and they go to your website. Now, the royal pain in the butt when it comes to presentation layer programming, so programming with HTML, CSS, JavaScript, that kind of stuff, is that the functionality and the look and feel between all the different browsers is quite different. I shouldn't say quite different. It's just different. So if you look at a web page using Internet Explorer or using Firefox or using Opera or using Chrome or using, I don't know, Chrome Mobile or Firefox Mobile or Opera Mobile or Safari Mobile or, you know what I mean? There's so many different browsers out there, and those are only the ones I can name off the top of my head. There's some that people use and believe in very much so, and that's fine. But there's so many of them out there, and each one has the opportunity to render something on the page, to take the code that you've typed in and interpret it in their own way and then mess everything up. Okay, so Internet Explorer is sort of the king of this concept. You can go and you can design your website and it will look beautiful in Chrome and in Safari and in Firefox. And you can go and interact with it and click on the buttons and obviously you want to make an interactive website because that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about a web application. So the common example that I use is logging into an application. I'll get back to that in a second, but the functionality and the look and feel can all be just fine until you open up Internet Explorer and then see that your buttons that should be on the right hand side are actually like at the top and off the screen a bit to the left, and when you click on them they do nothing. It throws a bunch of errors, and it's just maddening. Okay, or vice versa, it'll work fine in Internet Explorer, but on everything else it's broken. And that's where jQuery steps in. jQuery, like I said, dovetails with JavaScript to make the overall experience seamless. It makes the overall experience functional in the way that you would expect it to be functional across all of the different browsers. Okay, so jQuery goes with JavaScript. jQuery doesn't necessarily go with HTML and CSS. jQuery and JavaScript are what it's all about in terms of how they interact with each other. So fair enough. But then again, what does HTML do? And what does CSS do? And what does JavaScript do? So I guess that's what we're going to talk about in this episode. And then in the next episodes, we'll maybe start getting into the nitty-gritty of the important things like the syntax and all that stuff. But for now, I just want to give you a sort of the broad overview, the 10,000-foot view of the different technologies, what they're used for, and sort of just give you some background on them. Okay? So let's see. I just talked about jQuery. Now, what about JavaScript? What does JavaScript do? Why does it have the word Java in it? Actually, I don't usually give history lessons, but I think this is worth mentioning because a lot of people are curious about it. I believe when JavaScript was created, I forget what the original name of it was supposed to be. Excuse me, but I think what they had done is they named it JavaScript because at the time the Java programming language was really, really popular, or at least it was growing in popularity to the point where it was almost like a fad. Okay, at least thankfully it's not a fad. Java is here to stay, at least for the next 10 years. I remember reading an article that said the most likely language to last for the next 10 years, out of all the programming languages that exist today, Java got the number one spot for that, so that's great to know. In any case, the JavaScript people, when they were naming their language, they wanted to sort of ride on the coattails of the popularity of the Java programming language. I believe they had proposed other names that were kind of, well, I guess when you look at them now, they wouldn't have worked. But because they put the word Java in there, along with obviously JavaScript, they were able to ride the roller coaster of popularity that Java enjoyed. So they were able to gain popularity for their JavaScript language to the point now where it's a very standard language to use when you're creating interactive web pages. So good on them. There's your history lesson for today. Probably the first history lesson I've given on the show. It only took 61 episodes to hit. The reason for that is I hated the history lessons that I received for programming languages because I'm not a fan of history in that respect. I love history in general, but when it comes to programming languages, it's like, come on. I don't necessarily care who created the language. I don't necessarily care the year that it was invented. I don't necessarily care what group of people influenced it and why it became popular. Those are just the kind of little details that I just, it doesn't really move the needle for me. It doesn't move the chains, so to speak. So anyway, the point of JavaScript, getting to the real good stuff now, is to make a website interactive. Okay, so when you see a button on your web page and you can click on that button and it does something, that could be in part due to JavaScript. Okay, JavaScript is what allows you to do things like even error checking. Okay, you can actually click on a button and then let's say you're filling out a form, like let's say you are filling out your username and password to log into an application, and you let's say omit your password. You just type in your username and leave the password blank. When you click on the button to log in, a pop-up will appear on your page, or something will appear on the page and say, "Oh, you forgot to enter the password. Please enter in a valid password." And then it sort of puts the focus, the cursor, the blinker, inside of the password field, so you just can go ahead and type in, and it's sort of seamless and nice and easy. That is JavaScript. Okay, that is what JavaScript is all about, adding interactivity to web pages. And let me do a sidebar really quickly because I think this is also something that's funny to note. Another member of the Coders Campus website posted. Let me get his name because I want to commend him on this for doing it because it made me laugh quite hard. I was laughing with I was sitting on the couch with my fiance at the time when the message came in, and I went in and looked at it, and a gentleman inside of Coders Campus devised the outline for a drinking game. And I'm sure if he's listening to this now, which I'm sure he does listen to these podcast episodes, he's probably laughing too. Let me just get his name, because it slips my mind at the moment. He devised a drinking game around me, around my sort of Trevor-isms, if you will. The things that I say a lot. He called them tics. If you want to call them tics, that's just fine. I feel that's a bit of a negative connotation. I like to call them Trevor-isms. Anyway, around my way of speaking. So if I were to say things like, having said that, I say that a lot, or whatever, then you take 2 drinks. And one of the things was, if Trevor mentions using logging in as an example, then you take 4 drinks or something like that, which I thought was hilarious. Unless you're not a drinker, in which case I apologize. But very, very well done. He outlined all of my little things that I say all the time very well, and I had a good laugh about it. And the biggest one he said was, He did not include this rule in there because it happens so much. He said, if Trevor says so, and I know I say that a lot, but it's a great segue for me to go on to something else. So if I ever say so, he said if we were to introduce that as a rule, then everybody would be drunk right away. So anyway. And just having finally loaded up on my website here, it is Samori Augusto is the gentleman who proposed the drinking game rule. So thank you very much to him for that wonderful game. We'll see if anyone plays it. So, all right, there it is again. I just said so. We can move on to what I was just talking about, which was what? I've already forgotten. My train of thought is gone. We were talking about JavaScript, that's right, and logging in and using interactivity, so you can actually add, a little bit of, you can almost call it business logic inside of the presentation layer. Again, the presentation layer being the actual page that the actual, or the website that the actual people see, the users see and interact with. So you can actually add a few, quote-unquote business rules, business logic to it by, doing simple error checking and whatnot using JavaScript. All right, now JavaScript is also pretty powerful because when you combine JavaScript with other technologies, like it's something called AJAX, which is asynchronous, JavaScript and XML. I believe that's what it is. AJAX, asynchronous JavaScript and XML. I believe that's what it's called. When you combine those together, you can actually interact directly with your business layer without ever having to sort of leave the web page itself, which is kind of cool. Now, what that means, this is kind of a very advanced topic, and I'm kind of going off topic, but I just wanted to explain the power that you can really get out of something like JavaScript. So normally when you're interacting with a web page and you do something like you submit a form, okay, so let's say you type in your username and password and you submit the form, what that usually does is that sends something called a request to the server, or rather a post. You're posting information to the server, so that goes to Java. Java then takes that information and turns it into something it can use, like it turns the text into a string. Okay, so it goes into string, or maybe it goes into a data type like a date and time, or a number like an integer or a long, who knows. But it does some sort of conversion from HTML land, which is just plain text, to the Java land, which is object-oriented, and then it takes that data and it uses it on the business layer side, the Java side. So if it's a username and password, it goes in and it will check and maybe validate that the username exists, and if it does exist, that the password is correct and matches what we have in our database, and then if it's all good, then it returns something back to the presentation layer. Now, usually what happens there is when you click that submit button, you see the page sort of refreshes in front of your eyes. So maybe the password, let's say you typed in the wrong username and password, and what happens is that the page will sort of refresh on the screen. You'll see it sort of flash before your eyes and reload the whole page. So reloads the whole thing. It re-downloads, or at least it doesn't necessarily re-download the images, but let's say for the sake of argument that it re-downloads all the images, it re-displays all the buttons, all the text fields, but in addition, it shows an error message, and the error message says, invalid username and password. Now that is an example of a typical flow between the presentation layer and the business layer back to the presentation layer. But with a technology like AJAX, asynchronous JavaScript, and XML, you can actually sort of skip the user experience of having the page fully refresh. Now that might not seem like a big deal, but it does open up some really cool functionality, some really cool things that you can do with your websites. So let's say, for example, so what happens is when you use AJAX, so in other words, you're using JavaScript with XML, it will go talk to the server, get the data back from the server, and you can immediately show the message on the screen without ever having to fully refresh the page. So imagine this scenario. Let's change it from a user login page to a user registration page. Okay, you have your registration information. You need to type in your username, your password, your email address. You need to confirm your password. You need to put in maybe your birth date, and so on and so forth. But what happens is, let's say you have some restrictions on a couple of things. You have a restriction on the username because you obviously don't want to have a duplicate username, and you have a restriction on the password. Maybe it has to be a certain length. Actually, that's not a great example. Let's just stick with username. So what happens is, if someone types in their username, let's say they type in everything. They type in their username, their password, their email address, and they fill out the entire form, and then they say, okay, submit. I want to create that user account. It submits the information, like I said, to the business end, the business layer, and Java goes and checks, and sure enough, Java sees that someone already has claimed that username. It has to then go back and send this message back to the presentation layer. Okay, this is where your technology is coming in, your HTML, your CSS, your JavaScript, and everything that we're going to be talking about in the next few episodes. It has to go back and it's going to have to refresh the page. And what happens when you refresh the page? Well, by default, your password is going to be wiped out. Okay, that is just a feature of HTML. When you're using a password field, it never really remembers the password because that would be a security vulnerability. So it deletes the password. And that's really, really annoying if you have a long password and you need to keep on retyping it in every single time. That's really, really annoying. And let's say that you're trying to create a user account on something popular like Facebook. There's probably, all the usernames are probably already taken, and it would be just a huge frustration to keep trying a username and nope, it's not good. Someone already has that. Try again. Retype in your password. Resubmit. Or rather, reconfirm your password and then resubmit. Nope, someone already has that username. Delete your password. Retype in your password. Reconfirm your password. Type in a new user. It's just frustrating. So what you can do is, instead of having it refresh the page, you can make use of something called AJAX, like I've been talking about. And as soon as they type in their username, and maybe they hit tab, or maybe every time they type in a key character, who knows, it will always go and check the server and come back immediately without having to refresh the page and give you feedback on whether or not that is a good username or not. And oftentimes you see this. You'll type in your username, you'll hit tab to go in and fill out your password, and it will give you like a green check mark or something. Or it'll give you an X and give you a reason why that's not good. You have not seen the page refresh in front of your eyes because everything is still there in front of you. And it happens because it's using something called AJAX, which is really, really cool. So that is also what JavaScript can do, obviously in tandem with other technologies, but it's very, very powerful stuff. And the uses of JavaScript go far beyond what I've just given you as an examples of, but we will get into that later, probably after we talk about HTML and CSS. So that's what I'm going to be focusing on first, because if you only know JavaScript and you don't know HTML and CSS, then you can't really do anything with web pages. But if you know HTML and CSS, but you don't know JavaScript, you can start to make websites. They just won't necessarily be very interactive, if you catch my drift. So let's move our discussion on to the topic of HTML and CSS. Now, as I say from time to time, and I'll say this again, I am not an absolute expert when it comes to HTML and CSS. Okay, I've used the technology for the past, 7 years of my life, but I did not study it exclusively in any type of, educational environment. I did not. I learned by doing, which some people would argue is the best way to learn. But I do not have any formal education on HTML and CSS. So if I omit something that's very, very critical, by all means, you can feel free to email me and say, "Oh, Trevor, you made a mistake here, or you omitted something there, or maybe you should touch on this or talk about that." I give you the full permission to do that as I'm going through this series. Okay. But, like I said, I do have about 7 years of professional working experience with HTML and CSS. So although it wasn't exclusively my job to deal with this stuff, I definitely have dealt with it in many different aspects. So I would consider myself to be a little bit knowledgeable on the subject. So this is what we're going to be doing in, like I said, the next few lessons. So what is HTML and what is CSS? As I hinted at before, HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language. At least I'm pretty sure it does. My internet is down right now. Let me just check and see if it's up again. HTML. And I'll let that go. So I believe it's Hypertext Markup Language. And what it is, it's a language. It's a markup language, just like XML is a markup language. It is used to, it's a set of rules that is used to dictate sort of the syntax that you would put in that the browsers could read, interpret, and thus display back to you, sort of spit out the actual web page in front of your face. So HTML is a language that you use to talk to the browser, to tell the browser what it is you want to display on the web page when someone actually loads it up in their browser. All right? That is the language of browsers, if you will. And it's very common. It's not too difficult to learn. It is a set of rules that you're going to have to learn about, but it's actually focused around something called tags. And it's not necessarily a programming language. Okay, I wouldn't call it a programming language. I would call it a markup language, and it dictates that a certain format with these things called tags that you can use to actually create a website. To create the layout, the design of the website, to tell it what the website should look like and where the text should appear, what the text should say, what the title should be in the tab itself when you have the web page open in the tab in your browser. What should the tab say? So what should the title of the web page be? All those kinds of things. So that's all part of HTML. Now, then there's something called CSS, which is cascading style sheets, which sounds very weird, very strange, but all it really does is CSS, or cascading style sheets, is what you use to give your web page a design in terms of the actual look and feel of the web page. So it's kind of confusing because I might have already said that with HTML. HTML is what you use to say, okay, this is what text should appear on the website. This is what images should appear on the website, okay? And this text should appear before this text. So it's kind of like, opening up Microsoft, or no, it's kind of like opening up a plain old Notepad application, plain old Notepad document, and just sort of typing into it. That's, very plain text. You can't really add any design to it per se, right? But then you can bring in CSS, which is sort of like being able to bring up, Microsoft Word and, being able to bold some things and to be able to change the color of these things and change the fonts here to be this font and maybe throw an image in here and maybe stretch the image out so it's this big and then, add a, color palette here and decorate it, do all that kind of stuff. That's sort of the design that CSS allows you to do, but it allows you to do it in a very, let's call it smart, a very smart way. There is an algorithm that is used to determine what designs are applied to which sections of your website. Now that sounds kind of strange, and it is. It's tough to sort of wrap your head around it and actually use it well, but I mean that's just going to be the name of the game with learning CSS. CSS is tough for me because there are some kind of obscure rules that, like I said, I never really dove down deep into it and learned about this stuff. I just sort of know how to use it to my advantage and and use it in such a way that it pleases me. So, I mean, maybe that's going to be a great learning experience for me as well as I'm going through all of this stuff. Like I said, I learn a lot when I'm teaching, so I'm probably going to be learning a lot about CSS as I approach each of the individual topics. But we have just talked about HTML, CSS, JavaScript, jQuery, and a technology within JavaScript called AJAX. Okay, although jQuery is a technology inside of JavaScript as well, but it's kind of a different type. It's more of a framework than a technology. I know these terms are strange. These are just terms I'm sort of throwing off the cuff here. So this is sort of this is going to be your toolkit. This is going to be what you are going to be learning about and what you're going to be using as your go-to technologies for building the presentation layer of your application, of your web application. Okay, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, jQuery. And even then, we could sort of hit the pause button on that, and let's maybe not talk about any of the other stuff, because that's really more advanced topics. But really, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and jQuery. Those are the big four when it comes to creating web pages that are, that look nice, that look beautiful, and that you can actually interact with and have some, error checking done on, and actually have it, talk to your business layer, your actual Java technology. So that is what the what the future holds, there we go, for you in the next, like I said, series. Probably going to be, 10 episodes, maybe 15 episodes. I haven't a clue. We'll see where this journey takes us while we are walking that path. So I think that's good enough for an overview right now on all this technology. So, the main takeaway for this episode is understand that we're now going into the presentation layer. What the presentation layer means is you're going to be tinkering with what the actual user can see on the actual website. And we're going to be talking about 4 major pieces of technology, which are, like I said, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, jQuery. Okay? So as long as you can come out the other end of this episode with that knowledge, armed with that knowledge, and ready to charge forward and understand each of those 4 technologies, then you're in a good spot. All right? Cool. So I look forward to seeing you guys in the next episode. And we'll invite you to leave a rating and review for this podcast, which normally I talk about at the beginning of the show, but I've had more misery with getting access to the ratings and the reviews for my show. I just started using this new web service to get the reviews for me, because it's a really big pain in the butt to get all the reviews from all the different countries. It would literally take me hours every day to do this. So I use services to do this for me, and the website's down right now, so I can't access the ratings and reviews, which is unfortunate. I'll check back later, and hopefully it'll be up, and I can sort of weave in, through the magic of this technology, the podcasting technology, weave in the ratings and reviews. But in any case, I would invite you to go to leave a rating and review for this show, and any 5-star review that is left, I will read on at the start of the next episode, at the top of the next episode. So if you're interested in doing that, it would really help me out. It helps to get the word out about this podcast. It helps it get found. The more 5-star reviews a podcast has, the more likely it is to appear when someone types in the keywords like Java when they're searching for stuff in iTunes. The more 5 stars there are, the better, and the more people that have subscribed to the podcast, the better. So if you would also like to subscribe, if you haven't yet subscribed and are only listening to this through the howtoprogramwithjava.com blog, it would also do me a huge solid. It would be very, very cool if you could actually subscribe to this podcast as well. It's free to subscribe. It takes literally 2 seconds to do it. All you need to do is go to howtoprogramwithjava.com/love, LOVE, and that'll redirect you to my actual podcast inside of the iTunes application. So I think you'll need to have iTunes installed on your device. If it's a laptop or your cell phone or what have you, it'll open it up. and then you'll be able to go and there's going to be a big subscribe button. Click on that bad boy. Even if you've already subscribed on your phone, it would even still help me if you did it on your PC as well, or Mac. Go click on that button. Like I said, even if you've already subscribed, it will really, really help me out. That would be fantastic. Click on that button, and then you can go to click on ratings and reviews. So I believe it's reviews, if I'm not mistaken. There will be a tab there for it, and you can leave a 5-star review, or not. I mean, if you don't want to leave a 5-star, that's perfectly fine. I don't want to pressure you into doing that. But leave your comment about the show. I love getting the feedback from you guys. I read every single one, even if it's not a 5-star review. I absolutely read it. And sometimes I even talk about them on the show, even if they are not a 5-star. But if you feel I deserve it, then by all means, I would love for you to give me the 5-star, and I'll be reading it at the top of the next show. So again, howtoprogramwithjava.com/love, LOVE. Share the love, spread the word, make it happen. Can't wait to see you until the next episode, and happy learning. Bye for now.
Thanks for listening to the How to Program with Java podcast. Please visit howtoprogramwithjava.com for more useful Java tutorials.